Hello everyone, it's Sbaffi here again, and welcome to this session on the research design that you will choose to pick for your dissertation. Well, this is the main part, it's the most important part, the first aspect you should consider before embarking in your dissertation project. In this slide, we summarize what is expected of you. So there are two main points: that you show some form of understanding of the concept of research and the procedures associated with achieving that particular piece of research, and also that you produce a genuine, so a new piece of research. Of course, it has to be small scale because of the time frame and because of the constraints you have in your normal and working life. But the important thing, the key word here is that it's genuine, so that is brand new data. You can see your dissertation somehow as a form of training, I would say. That's the best word to describe what you're about to do. And it's a form of training to develop your skills as a researcher, which you will be using for the rest of your career. Of course, bear in mind that your end product, your dissertation, will have limitations, because every piece of research has limitations. I don't think that there is a single piece of research that is perfect, without limitation, without flaws, and so on. So what you're about to do is perfectly normal, perfectly within in range. So it's not the problem that there will be limitations. The problem is that you should be able, by the end of your dissertation, to explain what these limitations are, why they are there, and find a way to propose how this limitation could be overcome or reduced in possible future research. So as I said, you will not produce a perfect piece of research, because such a thing does not exist. But it's important that you understand the process of research. You carry it out as best as you can, to the best of your abilities, also given your constraints, your time and your workload and so on. And then at the end, reflect back and think of what went well, particularly well in your research plan, and what actually did go not so well and could have been improved somehow. So, well, research is a loose concept, if you wish. It is defined in different ways depending on the different contexts it's applied to. For example, I've been working for a while in pharmaceutical market research, and to them, for the industry, market research, so research implies that you have to find out for a client, for the public, or for whoever is paying you, what it is expected of a certain product, what are the views of the consumers on a certain new medicine. Basically, it's something very commercial based. In our environment, so in the academic environment, it's something more systematic, if you wish. So in terms of, for example, the definition of the University of Sheffield, this is what you find. So research is to be understood as original investigation undertaken in order to gain knowledge and understanding. And you find more about what Sheffield intends by research at this link I put here for you. In other words, you will have to conduct a systematically carried out piece of work which investigates and develops new knowledge using actually specified procedures and practices. Of course, bear in mind that to carry out this piece of research, There are a variety of methods, and of course you are familiar with such methods, so qualitative, quantitatives, and you will be provided with some refreshers later on during the induction. And also bear in mind that the conclusions you reach at the end of your research exercise will vary according to the evidence you produced. In more general words, this is the definition that the New Oxford Dictionary of English gives of research. So research is the systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. So what does this include? Of course, the research can be relevant to a variety of environments, a variety of fields, starting from, as I was mentioning before, the industry or commerce. So for the pharmaceutical or medical market research industry, it's just gathering information and insights on what healthcare professionals or consumers think about certain products. Or it could be important and relevant for particular public sectors, for example, the health sector, or even in our case for academic environments. So basically, the general concept of research involves the generation of ideas, of images, artifacts, anything that improves knowledge on a certain topic, that improves insights on a certain topic. It could also involve the use of pre-existing knowledge on a particular topic, and maybe just develop something, develop a product, develop new materials, new devices to improve something. But bear in mind that development alone is not enough to qualify as research. So there must be some sort of investigation behind and around it that makes it a piece of robust research and not just development. However, you also have to bear in mind that just to make your life easier, if you wish, there are things that are not included in the concept of research. And for example, here I'm reporting some of these things that are not included. For example, routine testing, analysis of materials, clinical audits, the maintenance of national standards. Just to give you a very practical example, I'm sure you remember how at the end of every module you are supposed to provide feedback on the quality of that module, of the teaching of that module. So you have to fill an evaluation form. Well, this is something that the university does on a regular basis. So every year, for every module, the same set of questions are proposed to the students. So this is not research, but this is a standard procedure. So this is something that is done on a regular basis, of course, to improve the standard of quality of our teaching, but it doesn't have any other components. So it's just simple administrative procedure. For example, even the development of new analytical tools, it's not defined as research. However, all these examples I'm providing you here could actually qualify as research if they are then evaluated somehow. So if there is a critical discussion around them, if there are suggestions of improvement or background or something that gives a bigger picture rather than simply provide, creating a new website or create new teaching materials, so a brand new set of lesson slides and so on. And however, even in this case, for example, if you create a database or if you create a website, that doesn't qualify as research. However, if, for example, you conduct an analysis on users' needs, for a certain database or for a certain website, then that would qualify as research, because you extend the meaning, you extend the function of a simple development, just as we were discussing in the previous slide. In general terms, something you might find easy to remember when thinking of your dissertation, usually research asks any of these questions, and you can actually use them in conjunction. So you can use individual questions for your dissertation, or combinations of them. So there are four main questions: the what, the why, the how, and really? So the what is what's happening here, what's going on, and this gives the contextual aspect of the research. So it describes the phenomenon, the event. And then the following, even logical question, if you wish, is why is this happening? Why a certain phenomenon exists? And this is what is called diagnostic research. So it's a step further to understand the reasons behind a certain event or a certain behavior. Then once you have established that, how well does this happen or exist? How well this has been working? So you critically evaluate a certain aspect, a certain behavior. And then the final question is, okay, now we know the history, we know the reasons, we know the success, if you wish, of a certain thing. Now, how could we improve it? How could we change it for the benefit of, I don't know, future users, future generations, and so on? And this is what is called the strategic research. And again, just to refer back to the concept of market research, this is by far the most important part of the research, because it gives insights on future developments, future improvements, something that ideally will bring more money into a company, or benefit the expansion of certain sectors, and so on. Another important aspect you should bear in mind when you conduct your research for your dissertation is that there is a certain order that should be followed to make sure that you actually come out at the end of it with something logical, with a credible piece of research. So the first step is to go through what is called research objectives. I know that you're all familiar with these concepts. You've been discussing them exhaustively with INF6500, but it's always good just to have some small tips and refreshers from time to time. So as I said, it's always important to first of all think of what you want to achieve with your research. So what questions do you intend to answer through your research? Once you've established that, then of course you have to think of the research, what is called the research design. So how will these objectives be achieved? What is the best way forward? And then of course you move to the phase of data collection. In this phase, you use different methodologies depending on the research design. So it could be a qualitative piece of research or a quantitative piece of research, or it could actually be a mixture of the two, what is called a mixed methodology, just to make sure that the research objectives are best covered and best answered. Once you've collected all your data in the way you deem more suitable, then you move to the data analysis phase. And of course, this phase is very different whether you collected quantitative or qualitative data. And there will be a couple of sessions explaining what's the best way forward in both cases with either quantitative or qualitative data. That will be made available for you later on MOL. And the final part of your research design, if you wish, is the communication of your research results, which in your case is nothing else than the writing up of your dissertation, the submission, and just the waiting for the feedback from your examiners. Now, in these slides, which has been developed by Peter Butt, so it's a diagram showing you well, the best way to approach a consistent piece of research. I know you've been going through this diagram in detail, again during INF6500, so here I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I just want to repropose it to you at the general level, just to give you the general idea. So basically everything starts from your research questions, like we've just seen in the previous slide. So you are generating an idea, you are developing new knowledge through your research question. And this new knowledge involves new concepts, new ideas, explanations of how people behave, how a certain phenomenon occurs, and so on. These concepts, these ideas, of course, the top level idea behind is that such understanding, such development of new knowledge must be generalizable. So transferable to environments, to our other circumstances, and this only can happen if you apply evidence, if you work through evidence, as opposed to your own idea, as opposed to your own personal opinions. So to make sure that your piece of research is acceptable, is objective, and actually a decent piece of research, you have to make sure that you go through evidence-based results rather than your opinions or your desires or what you wish it would happen in a certain circumstance, and so on. And you make sure that you actually achieve this result. If you oh gosh, I'm going in circles, aren't I? You make sure that you're not imposing your idea, so you keep neutral, you keep objective, that your research is reliable and consistent, so it can be easily reproduced in other circumstances, and that is true and made valid. Now, in the next few slides, I'll explain you how to achieve such results. Just a few more words about the neutrality aspects. There's so much you should be made aware when starting a new piece of research. And sometimes, because this is normal human nature, many of us don't even realize that with our own actions, with our own body language, we bias what other people think, and we guide them to provide a certain answer or move towards a certain choice. And that is something you really must be aware of. You might do something actually explicitly. So if you, I don't know, distribute a survey or a questionnaire, you might ask questions that you're not really supposed to, because they might stir the respondents towards a certain answer. So for example, you ask, do you like Coke or any other soft drink? Well, it's not an entirely objective question to ask, if you wish. Or you might actually even do it implicitly. So you select participants to a certain study. I don't know, you want to interview a set of doctors, but you only select a subset of that. So the people maybe that you know would answer in a certain way. So this is, again, imposing your bias on the research. So it's something that you have to be really careful and really aware about. Now, again, this is just to stress further the point I just showed you in the previous slide. So the validity, so the truthfulness of the research is just to make sure that your data does indeed map onto the concepts and relationships between them and what you say they do. So, for example, at the top level, this is about representing a phenomenon or a behavior as they really are and not as misrepresentations. An example to validate your data, for example. Suppose, as I said, you want to interview a set of doctors from your hospital or another group of people. So you've been through your data, you've analyzed your data, and you've written up your dissertation. And then on top of that, what you could do, for example, is to write up a summary with your findings in, and give such summary to the people who took part to your study and ask them for feedback on these findings. Check that what you've written is actually a true representation of what they wanted to say, so you are not misrepresenting their opinions and their ideas, and that's a good way to provide validity. This is for a qualitative piece of research. For a quantitative piece of research, for example, is that you ask a second person to check, to validate your numerical results. Again, this is something that, for example, in pharmaceutical market research is standard procedure. So every single piece of research has to be double checked, if not triple checked, by independent people. Of course, on the other side of the coin is that is also so easy to misinterpret and misrepresent a piece of research. For example, here I'm providing you a few examples. Suppose that you are conducting a study on people using hospital libraries and the weather conditions, but then you collect your data only in summer. So what about the other 3 seasons? Of course, your results in this case will be not representative of the whole picture, because in summer you might have some findings, some outcomes, but then maybe in winter it would be a completely different outcome. So you have to make sure that you give a true representation of a phenomenon. Or when you interview people, for example, you might give your own spin to what these people, the interviewees, are saying to you, and this is again a form of misinterpretation. Or in terms of, again, numerical data, you might use the wrong statistical test. The typical example is that you use parametric tests on data that are not normally distributed. So again, watch out. All these points I'm giving you are really important and so easy to fall into. Now, another aspect to consider is the reliability. So make sure that what you do in your research is reproducible in other circumstances. So avoid inconsistencies in when you write up your methodology. A good tip is that you seriously draft, even for yourself, and then you put it in a better form for your dissertation. But it's important that you write down every single step you've been taking. So, for example, if you asked a question, the same question, to a different set of people at a different time, would the respondents answer more or less in a similar way? Or if you asked another person to carry out your research for you, do you think that respondents would give similar answers to a different person that was not you? So these are all important points to bear in mind. Of course, again, it's very easy to compromise reliability of a piece of research. Suppose that throughout your data collection, you realize that, actually the methodology you're using is not that efficient, and so I don't know, you change, for example, in a questionnaire, the wording of some of the questions, or even the order sometimes can imply different responses from the respondents. And suppose that you do that because you have good reasons. Actually, you proved that with the new approach, actually the response rate is better, the quality of the responses is better, but you don't acknowledge it in your methodology, in your discussion, in the dissertation, that basically you just made your results invalid, unreliable. So make sure that every change, as I was saying before, is recorded. In this way, you can have a little bit of freedom in terms of changing your approach. Of course, it has to, be explained with decent reasons, with significant reasons, because simply explaining that, oh no, I didn't have the time to ask all those questions, well, it's not a reason good enough, if you know what I mean. So again, make sure that you record everything. The neutrality we discussed before when I was showing you Peter's diagram. So pretty much I'm just very briefly repeating myself if you wish. So make sure that you remain objective. So again, here are some examples of how you can lose your objectivity. So maybe you have an idea in mind of how a certain research should go, and you stir your results and your interpretation towards that preconceived idea, or you ask questions with hidden messages, like I was saying, do you like Coke or another soft drink? Well, of course, you stir them slightly towards Coke, or anyway, to think about Coke, at least. Or there are people who are actually hired by market research company who, with their body language and their behavior, they can guide people, influence people towards certain choices. Of course, none of us is as skilled as that, so that is not a big deal. But sometimes even our body language during an interview, maybe leaning forwards for a certain question or drawing back for another, is a form of behavior that could bias the responses. So it's something you should work on. It's also a fun exercise, if you wish. Just if you intend to go for an interview, for example, just organize a couple of mock interviews with your friends and get feedback on how you behave, on how your body language is, and try to work on the feedback you receive. Now, this is another very important point, the generalizability of your research. You should always make sure that you maximize the possibility, the likelihood that your findings can be applied to other cases in similar conditions. And generalizability is the term used for quantitative research. Transferability is the term used for qualitative research. So for the quantitative methodologies, you should make sure that your sample, the size of the sample and the quality of your sample is actually representative of the whole population, because this then will enable you to generalize your results to the wider population, which is actually ultimately the goal of any decent piece of research. In terms of qualitative research, make sure that your results can be transferred to other groups, similar groups if you wish, in terms of characteristics in similar circumstances. So these are two very important concepts to bear in mind. Example on, again, you could fail to generalize, make a piece of research generalizable or transferable, is, for example, if you exclude vital information from a questionnaire. Typical examples, the demographic information. So suppose you collect data on internet behavior or use of a certain tool or so on, and you just forget to include the gender or the age or I don't know, socioeconomic conditions. For the readers, for the public actually assessing your research, is very difficult to understand the relevance. So yes, but how important it is, how general is this? Is this just related to this small group of people, or could we actually amplify the results to a larger set? So it's important that you cover as much ground as possible. Or again, in terms of numerical data, like I was saying before, if you use the wrong statistical tool, that of course disqualifies, invalidates your results and your generalization. So again, if you use parametric tests on not normally distributed data, that's a bit of a mess, if you wish. Again, the concept of generalizability and applicability is something that you need to discuss at the end of your dissertation. So you will have to make sure that you clarify in your approach, in your writing, how your findings will apply to other cases in similar conditions, as we just said. The way in which your findings can be generalized, but such generalization depends also on the methodological approach you selected for your research. And also you have to spend some words on the way you have addressed the other issues we've discussed a few minutes ago. So the truthfulness, the consistency, and the neutrality. Pretty much we are at the end of this session. To make sure that you produce a good piece of work, a good quality research project, you have to follow a systematic procedure. And of course, using the appropriate methodologies, but here the key words are systematic and procedure. So make sure, as I said, I'm not going to stress this enough for you, you record every single step that you take throughout your data collection, your project design, and so on. And so we finally got to the final slide of the presentation. Just to wrap it up, what I wanted to discuss with you today was the several aspects of the dissertation module and what it is expected of you at the end of the module. We discussed a little the concept of research, what research is and what research isn't, and we also reviewed some of the important aspects which ensure the quality of your research piece, and so what you need to consider to make sure that your dissertation is going to be well received. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll be talking to you very soon in a different occasion. Bye bye for now.